Alright folks, in this video we're going to go through the process of bark tanning a raw coyote hide into a finished, soft, supple, and beautiful pelt like the one you see right here. Now this process is going to be 100% natural. We're not using any kind of commercial tanning agents. We're not using any harsh chemicals or anything like that. Everything that we're going to use comes straight from nature. The process that I'm going to show you today is going to work for most of your furs, talking about coyotes, fox, bobcats. If you're tanning a more greasy fur like a raccoon or a badger or something like that, there's some additional steps that you're going to need to do, and I'm going to cover that in a different video. So we've got our coyote fur here, and it's been case skinned and just kind of rinsed off in the creek, and nothing else has been done to it. You can see it's still got all the flesh and fat on the inside here. So we're just going to turn this thing inside out. We're going to throw it on the fleshing beam, get all that meat and fat off of it, and then we'll move on with the tanning process. So I will go ahead and warn you that if there are burrs in the hide, stuck in the hair, cockle burrs or anything like that, when you put it on your fleshing beam, you got to be real careful of those things, because if there's a lump under the hide when you're fleshing it, it's easy to knock a hole in them. So if you do have burrs in your hide or in the fur of the hide, go ahead and take a few minutes just to pull those out before you flesh it. So we'll just start fleshing this hide, and a lot of these furs are very thin. They're much thinner than a deer hide, so you got to be careful when you're getting the flesh off of them. You don't want to knock a hole in them if you can avoid it. And we're just going to push this flesh off versus trying to cut it off. So if the skin has a fold in it, you have to be careful there. Take a minute, straighten that fold out, because that's a place that you can pinch the hide and knock a hole in it. If when you're fleshing you get hide scrapings that get up underneath the blade of whatever you're using to flesh with, take a minute to scrape that off, and it'll bite better and get a better hold if you get that stuff off of there. This is kind of a big board for a small coyote, but we'll get her on there. All right, we've got our coyote on the board. Now I'm gonna let it dry like this overnight, and then once it dries just a little bit to set that fur, I'll take it off, flip it fur side out, brush the fur out, and then just let it dry on this board. All right, so our hide is dried overnight. I just kept this inside because it was cold out here, but got a little snow last night. We'll go ahead and take it off of here, flip it inside out, brush it out a little bit, and let it dry on the frame here. If you let this dry too much, it's a real pain to flip inside out or right side out. But this one's going pretty easy. Few burrs in the fur right here. So there's a lot of different plant and tree species that you can extract tannins from, and just a quick Google search will give you a list of a bunch of different things. You could probably find something local to your area. What I'm going to be using is bark from dug firs because I have a lot of it around this area. This is what we burn for firewood, and so I just pop the bark off when I'm splitting firewood. So if you're just going to be doing 1 or 2 hides, you can just take your bark and chop it up with an axe or a hatchet, and that'll be just fine. Just try to chop it into small pieces. But if you're going to be doing more than just a few, I would highly recommend getting a leaf chipper so that you can run your bark through that. This one is by Earthwise. I think I got this off of Amazon for like 150 bucks or something like that. I don't even think it was that much. But I have abused this thing and it's still going strong. I've run a lot of bark through this thing. So with this leaf chipper, I did have to cut a little piece out here so I could get the pieces of bark in there. But this thing works really, really well. The good thing about the leaf chippers is you end up with just a really fine bark shavings, and this helps a lot when it comes to extracting the tannins from the bark. It's much more efficient. You get more tannins from your bark because it's in much smaller pieces. The pot that I use to simmer my bark and extract the tannins is just made from an old beer keg. And you can get these from breweries, you can get them from liquor stores oftentimes, and you can buy them for just the deposit on the keg. Now, I don't remember what it costs. It's probably, maybe the deposit's probably 50 bucks or something like that. But when you talk about a 10-gallon stainless steel pot, for 50 bucks, that is very, very cheap. All you got to do is cut the top out of it and you've got a really nice big kettle. Whatever container you use to simmer your bark and extract the tannins needs to be non-reactive. So you're talking either aluminum or stainless steel. If you use just a mild steel container to simmer your bark, like maybe the bottom of a 55-gallon drum or something like that, it's going to react with the tannins and it's going to turn everything black. All right, so our coyote hide has been on the stretching board. It's completely dry. You can hear it kind of crackling like that. And we're ready to start the tanning process. So I've got my bark liquor here. This is the first batch. We'll go ahead and just take the coyote hide, submerge it in here. And then once it gets soft, I'm gonna take it and just flip it inside out so that that flesh side is exposed to more of the tanning solution. So this will be the 4th or 5th day that this hide has been soaking. I've squeegeed it out just once. So we'll just pull it out of here, put it on the beam, do it again. It's not going to take it's not going to take this thin hide very long, or shouldn't, to tan. So we'll just slip this coyote hide right here onto the fleshing beam, squeegee the water out again, and I'm going to try to, so I'm going to pull this down a little bit and just try to flesh this face out a little better. I don't know if I'll keep the face on it or not, probably not, but might as well just go ahead and see if we can get it fleshed out a little better. This thing being so thin like this, it's not going to take too long for those tannins to penetrate all the way through the hide. So if you're going to be fleshing out real detailed areas like around the eyes, the nose, the lips, pretty much the whole face in general, the easiest way that I've found to do it is actually with a grinder with a wire wheel on it, a softer wire wheel. And you can really get in there and take all of that excess gristle and flesh and fat and all that stuff off. Much easier than sitting here trying to you know, fiddle with a knife or something. Might actually do that. So what we're doing now is we're just squeegeeing out the liquid that the hide has already soaked up, and that's just going to open up the pores. It's going to help to stretch things out and make it easier for the hide to absorb more of the tannins. If you don't do this, the hide will still tan, it just takes a lot longer. I've had hides in bark liquor for up to a year before, you know, that I've neglected to do this step, you know, and they still tan just fine. But I mean, it takes a process that would normally take a few months and just makes it way, way, way longer. Some of this, I'm sure, like the belly of this hide is already tanned through because it's just very, very thin. And you notice I'm using the back of my draw knife. I don't want to just don't want to punch a hole in it. So I'm going to take this in and show you how I flesh around all of this detailed stuff with the bench grinder and a wire wheel. All right, so I've got a little 5-inch bench grinder here with a wire wheel on it, and this is the type of wheel that you're going to want for fleshing your hides. It's relatively soft as far as wire wheels goes, and I'm talking about in comparison to, you know, something like this. These really stiff ones like this will just shred your hides, so don't, you know, just avoid those things. But these are good for getting around the detailed area of the face, and then also if you put this on just an angle grinder, you can actually use it to thin the hide in thicker areas, which is going to make it much more supple. Couple of things to note on these wires will come out when this thing is on, so make sure if you're going to use one of these, make sure you have eye protection, and then, you know, if you're worried about it, maybe even a full face screen, because every time I use this wire wheel, I go back in the house and I'll feel something poking me, and there's wires that are sticking in my clothing, so just be aware of that. Leather gloves also, because we're going to be using our finger as a base kind of to work against this wire wheel. You'll see what I'm talking about here in just a sec. Probably plug it in. So I'm gonna start kind of at the back of the head here and just kind of work all this stuff forward, off towards the nose. I'm just gonna stick my finger inside and roll the hide down so it's tight, and just start working that stuff down. You'll be able to see, especially since this is partially tanned, I'm gonna work that, that membrane that's already soaked up the tannin. That'll work off and it'll expose that white hide below. So you'll really be able to see what's come off. I don't remember where I learned this from. I think it was out of an old taxidermy book. But this is by far the easiest method that I've ever found to do detailed fleshing work. Getting some of this stuff up around the back of the ear here. You can see how that membrane there is just kind of getting pushed off. All right, so just after a few minutes on the grinder there, you can see how much more of that just extra stuff that I got off around the face there. That's going to help that those tannins penetrate. And then, of course, off the back of the ears, got a little bit from out of there. Just kind of clean the face up a little bit. Now, it's not perfect, you know, it's hard to get all of that stuff from around the eyes, but that doesn't really matter anyway. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just throw this back down in the tannin solution, let it go for another couple days, and then we'll pull it out and re-squeegee it. I think, I don't know, I think that this hide is thin enough that it's probably gonna be tanned within 2 weeks, I'm guessing. But we'll just have to see. But it's coming along nice. Can't wait to see how it turns out. Our coyote hide has been in the bark liquor for about 3 weeks, and I've taken it out and just kind of wrung it out, squeegeed it out. I've squeegeed it out on the fleshing beam a couple of times, and I think it's done. I think it's tanned. Show you how to make sure of that. Y'all might notice the bison hide in the background. We're gonna be brain tanning this in a future video, so stay tuned for that. So we'll just wring as much of this liquid out as we can. To test this, to see if it's tanned all the way through, we just need to find a thick spot on the edge of the hide, and we're gonna cut into it. This looks like a good place, just kind of right here on this lip. We'll just make a little incision here and just kind of cut right along the edge there, just to make sure the tannins have penetrated all the way through the thicker parts of this hide. And you can see that it's a uniform color. I know that's kind of hard to see because it's a small hide, but it's a uniform color all the way through. So if this hide was not tanned all the way through, what you would see is a dark colored band on the top, dark colored band on the bottom, and a light colored band in the middle. And that's simply the raw hide where the tannins haven't penetrated all the way through the hide. And you can see that on this elk hide. If you see something like that, it just needs to go back into the bark liquor a little bit longer and just continue on with the process, bringing it out every day or so, wringing it out, putting it back in. Now, if you start to notice that your bark liquor is changing colors and turning more pale, you need to freshen it up, brew up a new batch, and stick your hide in that new batch. Because this coyote hide is relatively small and thin, I was able to do the whole thing with just one batch of bark liquor. But with something thicker like a deer hide or an elk, for instance, you'd have to go through many batches of this bark liquor. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish wringing this out, and then we'll give it a good washing before we continue on with the process. So the next thing I'm going to do is wash this hide, and that's going to help to get any little pieces of bark, dirt, anything like that was in the hide before we started the process. And then it's going to also help, there's a few little burrs in here that I didn't get before I tanned it. It'll help loosen some of that up, so it'll be a little easier to get those out. So I've got a bucket here with about 3.5 to 4 gallons of warm water and about a half a scoop of Tide. We'll go ahead and just douse our hide in here and give it a good swirl. Good washing, and then we'll move on with the process. I can guarantee you this coyote's never had a bath, so he's probably pretty dirty. So a lot of this stuff is just the bark liquor coming out of the fur, but there'll also be a bunch of dirt and just kind of grime that comes out of this fur as well. Now I'll just wring this out and rinse it in a couple of changes of just fresh clean water, just to kind of get all that detergent out of there, and then we can move on. It's a nice looking hide. So we need to let this fur dry a little bit before we turn it back flesh side out and oil the skin. So I'm just going to put it back on this stretching board and let the fur dry a little bit. Now we don't need to stretch this thing or anything. It's just the board's just to kind of help keep things spread out so the fur will dry a little bit faster. You don't have to put it back on this. But since it's on here, I'm going to open it up. Alright, so our fur is pretty dry, so we'll go ahead and just pop it off the hide frame here and then turn it flesh side out again. It's going to fluff up and make a really nice hide when it's all said and done. Alright, so now we just need to take this thing and turn it flesh side out again, and then we'll oil it and let it soak up that oil. Now if you have some holes in the hide that you want to sew up, now's going to be when you're going to want to do that. I do have a few holes in this hide, but I'm not worried about them, so I'm just going to leave them. So for oiling these hides, you can use a number of different things. I've used olive oil before. You could use tallow, tallow mixed with olive oil, which is I think called dubbing. But today I'm going to be using a neatsfoot oil. This stuff is all natural. It's rendered, I believe, from the shins from cattle. So we'll just open this up And this is a little bit cold, so it might be a little bit grainy, but we'll just put a little bit on here and then rub it in. We don't want too much, but you want a fair bit on there. Just rub it in. All of the flesh side needs to have some oil on it. Make sure you get in all of the little nooks and crannies. Try not to get it on the fur if you can help it. It's just going to make the fur greasy. But all of the flesh side, all the leather that you can see. Now this hide is pretty cold right now, so it's not really soaking up the oil, but I'll take it inside and let it warm up by the wood stove, and then it'll really soak that oil up. And we'll try to get some down along the inside of the tail here without getting the fur too greasy. Alright, so we're just going to hang this up and let it dry, and just kind of as it's drying, just kind of work it and stretch it and pull it a little bit. Now you don't want to hang this in the sun, because the sun is going to drive the moisture out of the skin too quickly. What you want is for this to dry slowly, and as it dries, as that water evaporates out of the skin, it'll draw that oil down into the skin. So just hang it in the shade somewhere, let it dry slowly, and work it as it dries. Now it's pretty cool out here right now. It's going to get down well below freezing tonight, and so I'm just going to take this inside the house and I'll hang it up near the wood stove where it's relatively warm, and then as it dries I'll do that. I'll work it and just soften it, and this should be a finished hide by tomorrow. So our coyote pelt is all dry, and just as it was drying, I was taking it and I was stretching it and just kind of roughing it up like this. And I did that. You know, you don't have to stay on it like you do when you're brain tanning something, but just every now and then, you know, take it down and just kind of give it a good rough up. And you can see how nice and soft this hide is. Just came out super nice. And even up here around these thicker areas around the neck is just nice and soft. Very nice hide. So we'll go ahead and flip this thing inside out so you can see how the fur turned out. Just stick your hand down there, grab a hold to it, and kind of peel it down like a sock. So you can see how nice this hide turned out. I mean, it's just, you can roll it over your hand. It's just soft, supple, and it turned out really nice. One of the complaints that I've heard from folks about bark tanning furs like this is that it can kind of discolor the hair a little bit. And it might do that on a fur that has like a really bright, like maybe a nice bobcat pelt with a really white belly. You might get a little bit of discoloration, but by washing the hide after you bark tan it in that tide, I think that really helps to reduce that and take a lot of that color that is introduced from the bark liquor out of it. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that and learned something, and we've got more brain tanning and bark tanning to come, so stick around. We'll see you on the next one. Bring on the winter.